subcommittee meetings from now through the end of February. That's the first. And then there is a second page for the dates for the superintendent forums, all I think but two, which have been scheduled. If everybody's had a chance to look at that, then we have a consent agenda, and if any of my colleagues are willing to move the consent agenda, I would welcome that. Thank you very much, Ms. Stone. Is there a second? Thank you very much, Ms. Ditkoff. Any discussion? Yes.
One thing, I know that in our cost savings, we've said that trips wouldn't be allowed unless they were previously approved, or if they weren't using substitutes. And I'm just wondering, have we been able to maintain that? Or do we need to?
No, thanks. So it was not our intention, actually at the time I thought that all of our 8th grade trips had been scheduled. It was not our intention from the beginning that that would apply to culminating event types of trips, and that included our class trips, 8th grade class trips. But in my view, it also included the OFC program trip. Those funds had originally been frozen. We went back and worked with the headmaster to free up the dollars necessary to conduct that trip, and that's why you have it here before you this evening. So we made an exception for class trips and the OFC trip.
And I think that's totally appropriate. I just want
I'm
to
glad
make
you
sure
asked.
that
Thank you.
it's clear to people why some yes and some maybe no.
I appreciate the question.
Thank you.
Great. That being the case, all those in favor, please. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. I think the ayes are unanimous. Now, the second item on our docket tonight is to say farewell, and maybe to have the Chinese students say farewell to us in connection with our exchange program, and I suspect at least a few of the people who are here tonight have to do with that. Dr. Lupini?
Yes, let me introduce Mr. Lantos, who is here this evening to assist us with this part of the program. Steve, thanks for your terrific work. I want to say a number of people, say to the committee, a number of people contact me regularly to tell me the outstanding work that you're doing on behalf of this program and on behalf of our students, and I want to let you know how much we appreciate that. So thanks for all that work, and thanks for being here this evening.
This year, we're sending our group of students on February 7th to China. Unlike in most years where they fly directly to Xi'an, where our sister school is, the Gaoxin School, They'll be flying a week in advance on February 7th to Shanghai, and we'll do some touring in that part of China, and then make their way to Xi'an. With some coincidence, their Chinese teacher, Li Hua Shorter, will meet them for a day and tour them. And I think I speak for her in saying that as a foreign language teacher, it really allows that teacher to come full circle and accompany her students in China so that they can speak Chinese. So she'll be with them on February 13th in Hangzhou. I can't say enough about the host families who for 5 months go out of their way to open up their houses to share much of our culture and language and customs. So I want to recognize them individually. Most of them are here tonight. Bob and Sloan Sable, who hosted the Chinese teacher, Jiwen Zhao, Harris Allen and Karen Welker. Yeah, can you please stand as I say your name? Harris Allen and Karen Welker, Teresa Chen and Ira Chan, Bob and Lee Cook, Alice and Chris Carpenter, teacher Tracy Bear and Steve Herskovici, Dr. David Bangsberg and Lynn O'Kelly, Pablo and Gloria Heraz, and teacher Lisa Shu and Phil Chernin. You have truly made the experience for the 8 students and teacher from Xi'an so meaningful. So thank all of you. And just quickly, I'll read a note that I got this morning when I got to school and opened up my email. This is from my counterpart, who some of you know in your last visit to the Gaoxin School. Dear Steve, we had a wonderful meeting this morning with the host families in Xi'an. Mr. Wang, our principal at the Gaoxin School, emphasized the importance of the valuable exchange program between our 2 schools and told the parents how to be good host families. Please find the host family contact info attached, which I've now been able to share with our Brookline students. We look forward to your group's arrival on February 14th to Xi'an and send our warm regards to your community. Fondly, Shi Ying. We know that Ms. Zhao and her group have had a full, wonderful time with all of you over these months in Brookline. So again, thank you. And I want to call up the Chinese teacher, Jiwen. Come on up.
Good evening, everyone. I still remember the moment when I stood here in September. At that time, I thought 156 days would be a long period, especially for a mother who has never left her kids. But now the end of the exchange program is approaching. How time flies. During the past 5 months, I'm amazed that quite a large number of Americans are crazy about Chinese culture. Different types of Chinese elements can be seen in your houses, in your clothes style, even on young people's skin. Chinese is taught as a main subject here in every school. During the past 5 months, I have realized that being a teacher is busy but happy no matter who you are. Because American teachers also stay up preparing lessons, grading homework, and writing comments. I have got to know the true meaning of teaching to help students know what to learn and how to learn. I'm moved by all host families. They took good care of us and make us feel at home. They are our good parents and friends. I am moved by Steve Lantos, who is always patient, helpful, and warm-hearted. He's a super teacher and tour guide. I'm moved by Nancy, who has hosted Chinese kids to ski for 13 years. She's so sweet and nice. I'm moved by American kids. They get to school on time, even on snowy mornings. They do homework carefully, even after receiving the offer of the famous university. I am moved by my Chinese kids. They get used to the life here and work hard at all subjects and keep writing our journals till today. We will leave Brookline in 17 days. I will tell my own kids how much I love them, I will hug and kiss my kids, as most Americans often do. I will point at Brookline, Massachusetts, on the map of the world, and tell them my stories here. Brookline, Massachusetts, were just the names of places to me before I came here. But now they mean warm, bright, and unforgettable. Thanks for listening.
We have two students who will just talk briefly about their time here. Three students.
Good evening, everyone. Time goes so fast. I remember that a few weeks after we arrived here, we came here for a welcome meeting, and now we came here again for a farewell meeting. So we just have a few days, just as Susan says, 17 days left to stay in Boston. Yeah, that's unbelievable. I should say that English is a language that is easy to learn, but it's hard to get deeper. This kind of difficulties represented represented in literature and history class, which are more about this language. We spend a lot of time to reading, so sometimes we still cannot get the meaning of a sentence, even if we knew all of the word in this sentence. But gradually we get over it. We can read faster now, and also we speak English more fluently. I think that's a part of our improvement here. And also, during the past 5 months, we got to be closer to American culture. Like we eat in American ways, and we study in American ways, and we celebrate American holidays, such as Halloween, Christmas Day, and Thanksgiving Day. They're the festivals that we don't have in China. So experiencing those festivals led us into the deeper American life. Moreover, we traveled a lot here. We went to Washington, D.C., the capital city of America, and in New York, one of the world's financial centers, in Philadelphia, where the Declaration of Independence were signed, and New Hampshire, the Granite State. Yeah. So, also we went to skiing and ice skating. We enjoyed that. So here I should say thank you to Steve, Nancy, and our host families, and you seated here who support this program. So all of you make our time here fantastic, perfect. Yeah, and thank you for making us enjoy our every moment here. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Sophie from China. I'm really glad to be in this Chinese exchange program. I always believe time is a magical step. It flows quietly like a spring and disappears quickly like lightning. During 5 months, I have a lot of people to thank, many places to remember, and a beautiful memory to take with me. Every time when we travel somewhere, Steve will always be our tour guide. Every time when we are homesick, we will be taken out for Chinese food. Every time when I learn new words, my host family will write them down on a blackboard to help me. Every time when I have questions, there are always teachers helping me with my problem. Every time when I get upset, my Chinese parents will always cheer me up on the other side of the earth. Every time when I feel lonely, my friends will always make me feel warm inside. Even though each every time sounds quite short, thousands of times make me 5 unforgettable months. There must be somewhere that I go, pass, and never remember again, but it can't be Brooklyn. There must be some people that I say hello, say goodbye to, and they leave nothing in my life. But it can't be my host family and the people in Brooklyn High School. Maybe it's time to say goodbye. But in Chinese, goodbye not only means to go away, but also means to say again. I believe I will see you all again in the future. Thank you.
Dear Superintendent Lupini and Brooklyn School Committee, hello, nice to see you again. Everybody talked about the last time when we were here, so I will skip it. Time has just flied. I found that our experience here were just like the fireworks in the dark nights, short but extremely glorious and colorful. I really appreciate the friendly people here. We come here alone with our home behind, but people here just have made us feel at home. Patient teachers explain stuff to us in English slowly and again in order to make us understand. The friends we made in high school helped us in class, greeted us in the hallways saying, "Hey dude, hey man." And I really want to say thank you to Mr. Lantos, Miss Stephens, and Mr. John. Because of their great organizations, we were able to have such lots of wonderful activities. Some of them were this that even my host dad said he hasn't done before. And I can't ignore my host family. They're like the most kind people in the world. They allow a boy whom they haven't ever seen before to live with them for half a year and take care of him, just as their own son and their brother, and ask for nothing in return. Thank you taking care of me. Thank you Chinese family. Thank you all the eight host families. Because of you, each one of us got a home here. Well, Forrest Gump's mom once said, "Life was just like a box of chocolate. You never know what you're gonna get." Before coming here, I could never imagine that the chocolate of our trips in US would be such sweet like this. And we are the 14th group. The exchange group program has benefited lots of people, and it's just like a bridge which connected thousands of students, hundreds of teachers from both schools, and hundreds of host families together. Lots of people are involved. For the communication between the two schools and for the relationship between the two main countries in the world. At last, thank you, the Superintendent Lupini and Brookline School Committee, for holding this fantastic program. Thank you. And I hope that the program will last long and go on being fantastic and making progress. Thank you.
And finally, I'll ask Brittany Stephens to come up and say a few words. Her group will be leaving Boston on February 7th, and they should arrive in Xi'an and be met by the members of the Gaoxin School on February 14th.
Do you guys want to stand up quickly, my group? Not you, Chen. You already had your moment. Okay. Just so you can remember their faces. I'm going to keep it very brief, as Steve mentioned. Okay, you can sit down. I just wanted you to be recognized. We have an event that we have to get to, so I will be very brief. I just want to speak on behalf of our group and say thank you so much for your support for the program. We are incredibly excited to be leaving in, 19 days, I think. And I'm going to borrow words from Deb. Today we had our MLK assembly at the high school, and Deb was speaking to the importance of having a global society, the importance of having a worldview, particularly for this generation of student. And we are so lucky to be in a district that supports programs that will give us that worldview. And we have already engaged in such authentic, unique, special learning in the fall, and we haven't even arrived in China yet. So I'm incredibly excited. I know that the students are as well, and I appreciate all of your support. We look forward to seeing you in June to tell you all about it.
Thanks, Brittany.
Well, we thank you all very much. We thank the host families. We thank Steve. We thank all of the teachers. We thank Headmaster Holman and everybody else here for continuing to make this program so exciting. Thank you. Any other quick comments before we let them go? Okay, we'll let you go. Oh, sorry about that. Thank you.
I can never resist making a comment when the Chinese students come, when they leave, and when our students come back. I want to thank all of the students from China, for having the courage to leave your home for half of the year and come to a place where you've never been before, and for sharing all of your life experiences with our Brookline students. And I want to thank the Brookline students for doing the same thing, for having the courage to go someplace else and to share your life experiences with people in a whole different culture. I know that for those students going back to China, you are going to be delighted to see your families. And I know that for the students going to China, you are going to be incredibly homesick some of the time. But all in all, at the end of it, this experience is really what schooling should be about learning about other people, about learning to think in ways that you may not have ever encountered before, and in really seeing the world, and seeing the world through eyes that will change during the time you have had your experience. When the students from China go back to the Gaoxian school, you will not be seeing it in the same way that you were seeing it when you were there, because you've had another experience entirely. And the students from Brookline High will be looking at the Gaoxian school, having a whole different experience, and it will change their view of their school here. And probably for all of you, it will change your life. That has certainly been the experience of many of the people that I have known who have been involved in this program. So I know that all of us on the school committee wish you well. Hope you have a wonderful trip. Those of you going back to China and those of you who are going to China for the first time, we'll be thinking about you.
Thank you, Barbara.
We cross this out and write Cindy. Like scrawl with my little finger.
Certainly.
Alan?
I think that's appropriate.
Oh, no, I think that's fine.
Headmaster Holman.
I signed some of them differently because I knew some of them better than others. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we should continue. If we can get everybody's attention. Why don't we begin with the subcommittee reports? Ms. Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Subcommittee met this past Monday, the 14th, here at Town Hall. We discussed the FY13 budget, primarily current actions in place to manage the projected deficit and the impact on teaching and learning and other programming across the district of the FY13 budget and budget deficit. We will, at the school committee, have a much more detailed opportunity to discuss that and what actions have been taken and where we are on that when we discuss the second quarter report coming up. We also spent some time talking about the FY14 budget and many of the moving parts at the state level and the local level. We also spent a few minutes just talking about an upcoming meeting where we've asked to have a little bit more of a deeper dive into sort of our special education trends, budget drivers in our special education budget, projections around special education populations and expenses. So looking forward to that meeting coming up. And our next subcommittee meeting is February 11th. Another one before? No, that's it. Oh, January 29th. Sorry, I'll be there. Our next subcommittee meeting is January 29th, followed by one on February 11th, and I look forward to seeing you there. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kershaw. Ms. Chalupsky.
Yeah, you'll have to bear with me. I think I have a pretty long report today. I don't know, should we do the vote first, maybe, that piece first, and then I'll go into the rest of the capital subcommittee issues. Today we need to vote the feasibility study agreement with the Mass School Building Authority. This is something that we've done already with Runkle and with Heath. We vote an agreement without numbers of knowing how much the project's going to cost. We do know that we have in the budget the monies for the feasibility and schematic design, which is I think 1.5 million if I'm not mistaken. I'm not 100% sure, but I think is that correct? And in order for us to get approval from the board of the Mass School Building Authority, we need to have taken this vote. The Building Commission took it Tuesday night. The selectmen are taking it this coming Tuesday night. That authorizes the town, Mel Kleckner, the town administrator, to execute the agreement on the behalf of the Building Commission. So I guess, I don't know if anybody has questions about this, but I may not have put
But
it more clearly.
you move that, is that correct, Ms. Chalupsky?
I move that we approve the feasibility study agreement with the Mass School Building Authority for the Devotion School project and to authorize Melvin Kleckner, Town Administrator, to execute the agreement on the Building Commission's behalf.
Great.
It should be on behalf of the Building
No.
Commission.
Questions, please.
Oh, no, I was just seconding.
Oh, you were seconding. Thank you very much, Ms. Cox. Right. Any questions?
I guess I was clear.
Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? I think the ayes have it unanimously. Thank you very much, Ms. Chalupsky.
Well, so
And
that.
We'll give you
can I just say
another-
that Since Ms. Jarlowski asked me the question, I just found the number, actually, the number on the feasibility schematic is 1.75.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was
Yes.
1.5 or 1.75.
1.75.
Thank you
You're welcome.
for looking that up. Also, the Devotion School project is on the agenda for the Mass School Building Authority on January
30th.
30th, somewhere between 10 and 12 in the morning. And I will be going together with Ms. Cox and Dr. Lupini and Mr. Rowe to hopefully hear them say yes and give us their blessing.
Great. Okay, but let me remind you that we're 20 minutes behind schedule, Ms. Chalupsky, as you continue.
You don't want me to editorialize? I mean, this is important stuff. I will be very careful, but I'm not the one who got us behind. Runkle School. I'm going to report a little bit on the Building Commission meeting the other night. I'm going to ask Ms. Scotto to report on some of the pieces, the Pierce School, and if she can. Runkle School, there's some fine-tuning happening of different mechanicals. There's some punch list items that will be done during the February vacation. The Mass CHIPS audit has gone in, and we're cautiously optimistic that everything will go well. And that's, you'll see there is a bill to GNR Construction, a change order for $25,000. I think that was in there in the pile that people are writing for a number of different items that needed to happen in the school. That's it for Runkle. Do you want to talk about Heath School, or do you want me to? Heath I have written down, but. Okay, the Heath School, still punch list items. Also, there's some contingency monies that are being looked at to do some upgrades within the building. I think we'll be better able to describe those things after the next meeting. There's some exterior landscaping that needs to happen that's washed out. Some of the slope there at Heath needs to be fixed by the contractor. So those are most of the items, but for the most part, everything is working well. If you'd like to add to that, please.
I can add a couple. There are bathrooms that need still to be fixed, and they need to add ladders for access to the roof.
Right.
But there's plenty of money left in the contingency fund to cover this. And the washout on the hillside has to be fixed.
Right. The Unified Arts Building, you'll see there's a contract in there, the big, thick pink one. Right now, the roof and pointing are part of the program for the building. The contract there is with the architectural firm to do some of the specifications, and one of the questions is on the Unified Arts Building, the replacement of the roof with either slate or asphalt shingles. And the cost is obviously one of the things. On the other hand, this is a historical building that has had slate, or a slate roof that lasted 111 years, 110 years. So that's pretty good amount of time for a building, for a roof to last, and it's not leaking right now. So that's the other important piece. But they will be examining it. It's the same group that looked at the Lawrence School, the same contractor. So, and that just repaired the Lawrence School as opposed to replacing it, the roof there. We are going to need to appoint a committee of 7, but I don't think that they've told you yet. I'm not sure, for elevators at the Pierce School, the Lynch, either to replace or to improve upon the elevators that are there at Pierce, Lynch, Lawrence, the UAB, and the Tappan Street Gym. At the Lawrence School, just for people's information, even though we did the renovation, we did try to save some money on one of the elevators that we did not replace. And so that's the one they're talking about, because I actually questioned why the Lawrence School, we just did the renovation. They need to do something with it, and I'm not sure. And I think once they start, the answer is I do not know, but there will be a committee of 7. I don't know if we announced it last time or not, but the committee of 7 on the high school concept study met and determined to interview 2 of the firms, HMFH and JCJ, which we will be doing at the high school on, come on guys, help me. The 13th? It's a Wednesday. Well, somebody will get the date in the meantime while we move on, because Mr. Morris wants us to move on. Pierce School.
Okay, Pierce School. We are at the point where contractors are being hired to complete the renovation there, the auditorium. There were 3 bidders, and...
Do you know? I'm sorry. I didn't think you knew what was happening. That's why I asked her to do it.
Do you know it?
Keep on going.
No. Please, Stone.
I don't
didn't-
care.
No, keep on.
All right. They have, Castle Blues recommended Contractors Network. They have previously done work for the town. They did a project at the transfer station, and there were some relatively minor issues there, getting in touch with them, and they're being late in completion. And Tony Quigley was very clear that we do not have the luxury of being late on this project, that it must be done this summer. And the company said that they had grown in size. They now had 7 or 8 people working for them, and that this would not be a problem. They've hired very good subcontractors, so hopefully this will be underway and be completed by September.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Let's just be clear, because we need to be very, very clear about the completion date. The schedule was never to have completion by September. The school has been extraordinarily accommodating in understanding that the major parts of the renovation would be accomplished over the summer when the students are not in the building, but that actual completion, not substantial completion, but actual completion is probably going to be the end of October. So, but the school Pierce has been preparing for that and continues to be great about anticipating it.
So, Ms. Stone was kind enough to give me the date of Wednesday, January 23rd is when the committee is meeting for the high school concept study. Thank you. I assume in the MLK room, but I'm not 100% sure, but it will, we'll let people know. The last piece is that we had a curriculum. We did have a curriculum subcommittee, but that isn't the one I'm reporting on. We had a capital subcommittee meeting last week where we had a vigorous discussion about modulars and the issues around them, surrounding them, the need to really look at whether this was going to be able to be accomplished by September when we need them, and some discussion of were there any other options for next year within the school system, and if this was, what would our plan B be if they were not able to be accomplished. I thought it was an excellent conversation, and we talked about getting some data back in terms of help me, somebody who was there. We asked Peter to come back to us with some information about
actual costs of different options.
right,
That didn't include modulars.
right, the costs and the feasibility of some options without the modulars. We have our next, and he was going to do that for the next capital subcommittee meeting, which is February 8th at 10 p.m. 10 a.m., not p.m., a.m. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Ms. Charlevsky. Oh, my apologies, Ms. Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering if those options that you're discussing relative to the modulars will be presented at the forum at Lawrence on the 22nd. Okay, thanks.
We're, I have to do the final on this with Mr. Rogers tomorrow, and I've already met with Dan Bennett to talk about the two options. And we're actually going to talk about both, because there are two main options, one with modular and one without, and they both obviously have their own significant impact. The non-modular option requires us to look at moving a K-8 class, something in the K-8 configuration, out of the building, and so we're looking at that around that school and others. But to your question, we will specifically talk about all the issues that are at play, specific to Lawrence, looking also at the district enrollment that may play out depending on which of these options we're able to implement.
And if I could add, I think there's the one unknown out there at this point is what is our kindergarten registration?
Well, okay, so it's unknown, but we have 10
I mean,
or
we're
more
going with
years
assumptions.
No, they're not assumptions. There are 10 years or more of data that give us prediction models. And if anything, over the last number of years, our prediction models have been short of the numbers that we've ended up with. And our prediction models have set our number at 660 and give us some idea of where those classes might be and drive us to a pretty solid assumption of 4 sections at the Lawrence School. We can do certain things if it's 3. It's not been 3 in some time. We've artificially created a 3. And we have the interaction of the issues. This is no longer a single school hasn't been a single school problem, but more today than ever, it's not a single school problem. We have the interaction of the number of sections that will require at Pierce and the number of sections that will require at Devotion, both of which interact on a daily basis with that of the Lawrence enrollment. And so, you know, I can sit here as well and say, well, it may end up lower than this, it may end up higher than this. These are good assumptions that drive us to say that if we end up with what we've been ending up with, given the same prediction models, then we're going to need to look carefully at where we would house classes without these additional classrooms because we don't have room.
Mm-hmm. And that was the conversation that we were having. And even more so than Lawrence, Devotion, because there's, you know, if another 6 come in next year, we're even in.
Yeah, so I was asked the question specific to Lawrence. It's clear that this idea of classes in certain grade levels being housed at other buildings is on the table for more than just the Lawrence School. It's the Lawrence School where we have this upcoming meeting.
Okay, is that helpful?
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Gatto, curriculum.
We have tonight a proposed vote to approve the Brookline High School course catalog changes for next year. The curriculum committee met this past Tuesday and had a presentation from Dr. Holman and Mary Birchinall about them. The determination was made by the English department that they would like to focus on the sophomore English courses, and over a 2-year period, they thought about what they wanted to do, talked to various people, looked at what other high schools were doing, looked at what the core curriculum, Common Core changes were, and they came up with 2 courses that they would like to be offering next year for the sophomore class. Now, the sophomore curriculum is a world literature curriculum. There is presently an honors track and a standard track. And there are certain core texts, this is as it exists right now, there are certain core texts that they read. Things Fall Apart by Achebe, either Othello or Macbeth by Shakespeare, The Doll's House by Ibsen. These are core texts that every sophomore reads. The proposal is that these 2 options will stay available for everyone, that the other options will be other 2 options will be courses that will be divided into sort of the core segment where the students in these courses will continue to read the books that I have mentioned as the core text and focus on world literature. But one of the courses, which is called Future World Literature, will focus for 2 terms on science fiction, fantasy, and dystopian fiction. It will also have a significant chunk of nonfiction. The focus will be on the future, so there will be creative projects where the students may look at what's happening in technology, what's happening in climate change, what's happening in medicine, and project about the future, as well as fictional reading. And they might do filmmaking, game design, all kinds of things like that. The real world literature class will focus on themes of identity and community, where students will ask questions such as, how do I define myself? How do other people define me? And will read texts set around those questions. Now, just to reiterate, that means there will be 4 offerings. There will be the 2 world literature offerings, the straightforward offering, that is, one is standard, one is honors. There will be another course called Future Literature that will combine the world literature in for 1 half of the year. It will probably be like perhaps the beginning and then the spring semester. And we'll focus on the looking at the future. And then there will be also the other course that looks at identity issues and combines the 2. Now, the difference, one of the real differences here as well is that both of these 2 new offerings will be offered at the standard and honors level, but the classes will be heterogeneous. So half of the students might be at the honors level, half at the And teachers in those courses will be looking at ways to differentiate to be able to reach all of the students in the program. And so there will be, as I said, these 4 offerings, and teachers, I think, will opt if they would prefer to choose and try out this new model where differentiation will take place. And it sounds, certainly to me, very exciting. So I would like to propose that we approve these course changes to the BHS course catalog for 2013-14.
We have a motion. Questions and comments, please.
We have a second.
Oh, I've got a second. Ms. Cox, thank you again. Sorry.
If I may have a comment.
Yes, please.
As a student who has taken a bunch of mixed level classes at Brooklyn High School, I'd just like to make a brief pitch for those because I've found them to be very beneficial. I've taken them both a higher and lower level, and I think that they can be really helpful for students at both levels. For students at lower levels, it can be a real push to work harder in a course and to push yourself to the next level. And for students in the higher level, it can be really helpful to solidify your learning by helping students who might not be at the same level you are. So I think those are really great courses, and I would like to see more mixed level classes at the high school, and I'd also love to see some more mixed grade classes for the same reason. Thank you.
Great, Sam. Thanks. Other? Ms. Scotto, I was trying to reflect on that meeting. We also said that we were interested in making sure that the classes were all of a diverse nature. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. We did some speculation about who would sign up for these courses. Would it appeal to one particular cohort of students or another one? And it is something that the department is well aware of and will keep their eye on.
Great.
I
Yes.
I remember them saying that if there were not equitable distribution, that they would consider not running it. Is that right? I mean, I think there were tweaks and whatnot, but if it were not equitable, they were going to consider not running it.
I
heard.
think that's true, but I think they felt they could tweak it in such a way that it wouldn't be an issue.
Right, but if they couldn't, that not running it was going to be on the table.
Nestor is here and could maybe.
Would you like to address that?
I think just that equity, I mean, I think a couple of concerns came up. One was around professional development for teachers needed in order to be able to do multi-level courses if they'd never done such a thing before, that was a shift. The second was that since this was part of our global curriculum, that there still be some global component to it, and that was some of the 2 out of 4 semesters thinking about that. But then the last one was about equity, about who might take it, demographics and whatnot. So there was a robust discussion around this. So.
Yeah, Susan, I do remember that, and Barbara's right. We do think we can tweak it, and part of it, a big part of who gets into the class, the students can certainly, obviously, choose, and hopefully we'll have equitable distribution. But a lot of it is in the cell of the 9th grade English teachers, and that's one of the great things about starting this in 10th grade, because we have control over or impact on recommending the 9th graders to the 10th grade course, and the teachers in 9th grade can know their students, of course, and really recommend one course or another that they think is going to fit the interests of that student or the challenge level, or really get them engaged in a great way for 10th grade. So.
Sorry, can I ask a question? But I didn't come away from the conversation thinking we would run a class if we couldn't figure out how to make it equitable. If we saw an equity problem, we tried to tweak it, it didn't work. I didn't come away from the conversation thinking we were going to run it anyway. Did I miss that?
I'm not completely remembering that. I think maybe I'm stuck in our confidence that we think we can get them into the distribution that we want and are comfortable with.
Especially since the schedule is done by the administration, you should be able to manage it in such a way that it does become as much as possible.
Right, no, and I remember there were caps that one could put in about the honors and standard in order to make it work.
And remember that kids could start out in 1 and then change by October 2. So there was, so it won't be perfect.
No,
It
but
can't.
I don't think perfect was what we were talking about. I didn't remember that being part of the problem.
Yeah, I think we're confident that we're not going to get a homogeneous group of students signing up for these classes. If that ends up happening, yes, we would relook at what has just happened.
That was what I took away.
Yes, okay, good.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor of the motion regarding the new courses? Yes? Aye? Those opposed? Thank you very much. And thank you, Ms. Holman, very much.
I'm not finished, Mr. Morse.
Sorry.
I'm sorry to I have more curriculum subcommittee for you. We met last Tuesday, January 15th, and Dr. Lupini presented about the educator evaluation that is being piloted right now, and it's being piloted so that we can see what works best for Brookline. He demonstrated the Teach Point computer software that is designed for evaluation, contains many various rubrics and checklists. We can add our own, we can import them from other school systems, and people are trying them out, seeing how they work, and so forth. It was very interesting because he did talk about different ways people were using this across the system. What is important is that this is an evolving evaluation system, and the goal really is to help people develop as excellent teachers wherever they happen to be in their career, and also to help develop the capacity of the evaluators to really look at teachers and be able to guide them in how they need to develop. So I think we came away from that feeling very good about what the system was doing. And the only other thing I have to say is that on February 12th, we will be meeting at 10:30 to look at the new state initiatives that Mindy Paula will tell us about that are part of the ELL program.
Thank you, Ms.
I think
Gatto.
I've finished.
Okay. I'll still give you more time if you want it. Okay. Great. We have a motion on the, no, we don't have a motion on the table. That was just a report. Right. So thank you very much. Government Relations, Ms. Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also don't have a vote to note tonight. To note. It's one of those nights. We had a very successful, I thought, legislative breakfast on last Friday. Was it just last Friday morning? Yes, it was last Friday morning. Although we missed Dr. Lupini's being there, but we had, as we have come to expect, we probably shouldn't take this for granted, but as we have come to expect, a very frank and productive exchange with our legislative delegation. Mike Moran wasn't with us, but the rest of our representatives were. We presented the legislative priorities that we've discussed in detail here at the table, so I won't review all of them. But it was mostly a chance to talk to our legislators about the problems that are facing Brookline, all of which really come down to a combination of our operating and capital expenses being much greater than we can afford, driven by the enrollment growth. And I thought that they were all uniformly supportive of the initiatives that we've asked them to undertake on our behalf. We got commitments that the legislation introduced in the last session will be reintroduced in this session, including the more difficult, or what Ms. Didkoff characterized last year, I believe, as the heaviest lift, which is the trying to get some kind of relief for medically mandated services in the schools, which are currently carried by school districts, and we would like them to be carried by private insurance. That's going to be a long time in coming, but I was really, really encouraged by what our legislators told us about being willing to continue to push for that, and how we could support them in terms of keeping on the efforts that we've been making to build a coalition around that issue in particular. So it was terrific, and I want to thank all of the members of the committee who joined us that morning, and Ms. Coyne, as always, for her extraordinary organizational capacity and getting us to the table and having everything there ready for us. So thank you all.
And you, Ms. Stone, for leading the charge and for really organizing us for our legislative priorities and making a terrific pitch.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have no further meetings right now scheduled of the Government Relations Subcommittee.
Very good. We're at negotiations. Dr. Warren, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a short report. We're contemplating, we're going to be beginning negotiations with cafeteria workers later this month on the 30th.
Very good. Policy review again, Ms. Stone.
Get back to my other document. It's gone, it's gone. All right, so I'm going to try to, no, I can't possibly remember all of this. You should all have received a copy of a memo that I sent around, which was outlining, oh, thank you, Dr. Warren, my hero. Outlining the agenda. We had a policy subcommittee meeting a couple of months ago where we had put on our agenda and goals for the year five policies that were priority review for this year. A subsequent conversation with town council and with Dr. Lupini revealed that it is not 5 but 13 policies that are on our agenda as priorities for review in this year. And so the memo that I sent around to all of you identifies those 13 and lays out how we're planning to address them. They include policies that we discussed just this week on physical restraint, CORI, and mandated reporting. They also include a review of policies on discipline, cheating and plagiarism, graduation requirements, and what we are now referring to as the ethics umbrella, which is the review of Section G that we've talked about before when we discussed teacher gifts. That includes now looking at intellectual property, continuing and concluding our revision of the teacher gifts, looking also at tutoring by BHS and public school staff, and if we get to it, we will also be looking at some issues that came out of school time program review, and on if we can, on drug testing and the materials fee program. Anyway, it's a very, very full agenda. We did at our meeting this week take up a discussion of the first 3 of those: physical restraint of students, CORI, background checks, and mandated reporting. We had a terrific meeting on all 3 of those, and we'll be moving 2 of them to a first reading actually for our next January 31st school committee meeting, so we'll have more time to discuss those in detail then. Our town council, Jocelyn Murphy, is going to be developing for us a new policy that is on background checks generally, and we're going to try to incorporate the CORI reforms that we have to do in order to bring it into compliance with new laws, along with SORI reviews, and I can't remember what the third one is. Is that the
FBI?
Oh, the FBI, the fingerprinting, right. So we're gonna have a new policy that incorporates some existing policies and revisions of those, and then new policies that we have to develop. We also discussed, apropos of Mr. Arlupski's report of capital, we had a discussion of whether or not there were policy implications for the committee about the potential need in the absence of, if in fact we decide not to go with a modulars solution to the space problem at, in particular, space program, the Final Frontier, at Lawrence and Baker, that the superintendent would absolutely need the flexibility that only this committee can give him to locate at whole classrooms at other public school locations. So the possibility, as we've been discussing with Devotion, the possibilities that kindergartens would be moved to classrooms that are either rented or created in otherwise owned buildings, but also the possibility that there might be room, for example, at the Pierce School or the Lincoln School or the Driscoll School for a kindergarten classroom, and the possibility that, say, a Lawrence classroom would be located at a different elementary school. It would still be a Lawrence classroom, and so we may be bringing something to the committee also on the 31st to try to articulate that authority and discuss giving it to the superintendent. So more to come on all of that, and we meet next, the policy subcommittee meets next on February 7th. We will be taking up, continuing to take up the background checks policy. We will also be looking at proof of residency policy and the use of space and rental of school buildings. And that is my report.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Ms. Ditkoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're a good man, Charlie Brown.
Thank you, Ms. Ditkoff.
Ms. Jalewski.
Well, just to remember for the policy on moving classrooms or groups of classrooms, there is some precedent of having done it in the system before, so that I think it should be, something that's feasible for us to give that that authority option to the superintendent to be used in those cases. Because we have.
It's pretty clear from the policy manual that we can give it, but that we have to make an adjustment in order to do so.
Right. I mean, it's like when we moved a whole school to the old Lincoln School, or when we moved part of it to when we moved part of Baker to Baldwin, or things like that. So, okay.
Great. Are there any additional liaisons? Ms. Jalewski?
Just a quick one. I was at the BEEP Connections meeting, the Early Childhood Connections meeting, and they announced that they will be doing the Parent-Child Home Program, will be doing a fundraiser over at the music school on March 7th in the evening. That was actually what the parent who came here last time was talking about, but I don't think the date had been set at that point. The other thing that just continues to amaze me, and I just want to share it with everybody, is the amount of collaboration between different parts of the town at this meeting is stupendous. I think I've told you before, but it's just worth repeating once more. The Community Fund, the library, BAT TV, the Community Mental Health Center, the Parent-Child Home Program, the Housing Authority. Everybody is represented at this meeting and are all working together to help one another out, whether it be with space, with people to help, the collaboration. I don't have the details, so I'm a little bit reticent to talk about it totally, but I know that there's a collaboration between the school department and the rec department on a play group for young kids at the rec department. So those sorts of things have been fantastic, and I think that it's just something that we should all be very proud of. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm going to have to discipline myself, Ms. Jalewski, because I have a couple of things to say, even though we're out of time for this. So I just want you to know what's good for one person is good for another, right? I just want to announce, I'm not sure why this is relevant here, but it seems like as good a place as any, that the Board of Selectmen has voted to approve remote participation in public meetings under certain circumstances. And I hope that each of the chairs of our subcommittees, as well as our co-chair and I know our chair has received notice of when some of the training will take place, and for any of us who want to do this, we need to go through that training. I think it takes about 30 minutes.
Along with the appropriate staff members, as I understand.
Along with the appropriate staff members. Well, okay.
So this is a matter of if school councils intend to exercise the remote participation piece then the principals, and I believe the co-chair, well, the other co-chair, the parent co-chair of those councils would have to go through, participate in the same training. We have not advised them of how that will work yet. We will be doing so next week.
Ms. Coy, do you know whether, have the subcommittee chairs received notice of this training?
Yes, and we've been signing up as
Okay.
we speak.
Great. So you can't do it until you've had the training. But I want to publicly thank our town council, Jennifer DePazzo, who really understood the importance for enabling busy people to continue to volunteer. And she really was the person who carried the day with the Board of Selectmen. It was really terrific. I want to report as briefly as I can on our committee, which up until now has been called the Case for Space. I would first like to announce that I think we have a serious movement led by my colleague, Ms. Stone, to call the committee B-Space, B for Brookline, and then SPACE. I can't remember what it stands for, and I'm not going to repeat it here. But anyway, B-Space is, I think, what we're going to call it.
I believe it stands for
Capital expansion.
Something like that, right.
School population and capital expansion.
Thank you. And we had what I thought was a terrific first meeting last Monday with lots of participation and some good data from Dr. Lupini and Mr. Rowe. And our next, I believe our next meeting, which is a week from this coming Monday, will focus on the short-term plans that we have made for space, and then we'll attempt to deal with the question of whether we need a new school. And my objective is to make that determination one way or another at that meeting, so then we can proceed with clarity. And so I would take any questions that come up, but I'm not going to describe it anymore. We had a number of people who Ms. Stone and Ms. Ditkoff, who participated, as well as Dr. Lupini. And do you have anything else you'd like to add? Oh, thank you very much. So we do have a vote, and we have a vote, as I think you know, because the Board of Selectmen made some adjustments to our charge. And I believe I sent each of you a copy of our original charge that was annotated for all the changes that the Board of Selectmen wished to make. And then I believe you also received a clean copy of the new charge. It was my opinion that there were no fundamental changes in what was made, and I would urge you to vote in favor of that, and I move that we accept the charge as adjusted by the Board of Selectmen. But if you have any, I guess I'd like a second first. Thank you very much. And now, are there any questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, I would just second what you said, that the changes are minimal and do not change at all what we expected when we voted it the first time.
Right. Okay. If there are no other comments, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Thank you very much. And with that, we are completed with the subcommittee reports. We'll see if there's any public comment desired. No public comment signed up for. Is there anyone here who would like to make a public comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll proceed. Dr. Lupini, your report, sir.
Thank you, sir. You have a copy of the report, and it's slightly different than the version that I sent you. Yesterday, we were able to add 2 last-minute items. One of these very, very exciting item. In December, you met Brandon Miles as one of the students who presented with the MSAN student group. Brandon was also featured in an article in the Tab a number of months back about the METCO program. Terrific, terrific young man. And I'm thrilled to tell you that he has been selected as a Posse Scholar and will attend Hamilton College in the fall. Posse, as you know, is a highly selective program, college access and leadership development that offers 4-year full tuition leadership scholarships to participating students. There are 14,000 nominations made in 2011 for only 560 slots. Brandon will join a group of 10 students, a posse from Boston, who will participate in team building and leadership training before they all go off to Hamilton. So congratulations to him. I didn't have a chance to look this up today. I believe this is at least the 3rd consecutive year, and it may be more, that a Brookline Metco student has received a Posse scholarship. And I want to say that over the 8 or 9 years that I've been here, there have been 5 or 6 students fall into that category. So it's terrific that our Metco students are interested in this scholarship program, are involved in this scholarship program within Boston, and are obviously successful at gaining entrance into this a terrific, terrific program. The principals and senior staff, we will hold our annual leadership team retreat next week. We're traveling to far-off lands of Beverly, Massachusetts.
Yeah, we noticed that.
Yeah, at Endicott College. It's a ways up the road, let me tell you. We're going to have the great opportunity to work with John Dioria from Teachers 21 and Erwin Blummer from Boston College on different aspects of the Educator Evaluation work. And as is often the case, I want to express our appreciation to the Brookline Education Foundation, who foot the bill for this particular endeavor that we're able to engage in on a yearly basis. It was mentioned earlier, but next Tuesday, January 22nd at 6:30 will be the Lawrence Community Meeting to discuss our enrollment issues and the various options, including modulars, that are on the table for gaining additional space or gaining space for our students at Lawrence. I've provided you with a brief explanation here of some recent action regarding the 2012-2013 calendar. As you know, as we sit here this evening, school will end in Brookline on June 25th for all of our schools other than Runkle, and will end on June 27th at Runkle. That leaves us with, we have a collective bargaining agreement that says school must end before July commences. It's not state law. It is a collective bargaining, a piece of collective bargaining language. That leaves us with 1 day for Runkle School. So let's focus on Runkle. 3 days for the district, but 1 day at Runkle. If that contract language were in place for 12-13, and should we have more than one snow day or school cancellation day, I would be forced to go back and take days from a vacation, probably April. So we were engaged in discussions with the BEU, with my counterpart, the president of the BEU, Jessica Wender-Schubo, about modification to that language that would allow us to go into July if necessary. And I'm pleased to report that the BEU has agreed to a waiver of the language for the current school year. This will mean that we could extend the calendar through July 3rd if necessary. I'm hoping it's not necessary. Specifically, one additional day is easy to sort of show here. We would end on the 26th for all of our schools and the 28th at Runkle. That is the Friday of that week. 2 days could mean that we at least have the ability to go to Monday, July 1st at Runkle School, and of course still have some days in June to exhaust for our other schools. So it's great this early in the process to actually have options, and I want to thank Jessica for her work in helping with this, and to the executive committee for giving me this ability to have some options in completing the 12-13 school year. We're going to provide parents and students with updates regarding the calendar if and when we experience additional school cancellations, and we're going to sit here and hope that we don't. The other item that's new to the report tonight is an item about the special education, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education coordinated review. Some of you remember the coordinated review from, I think it was 6 years ago now. Well, we're ready to engage in a coordinated program review. One of the new elements is a parent survey. And you can see the indicator here in terms of parent engagement. The purpose of the online survey is to reflect how well our schools are partnering with parents, helping students to transition from grade to grade and to adult life, and to provide training for families in areas of interest. So this survey will go up on January 28th and will end on Friday, March 29th. We have a number of ideas about how to get the word out about the survey, using our website, working with CPAC, working with our school-based PTOs and their newsletters, and feel confident that we can get the word out and get a high degree of participation, which will give us the kind of information that we're seeking to create better programming for our students and for our parents. So more to come on that. You'll see actually some things very, very soon in a number of those locations. And on Monday, January 28th, we will hold our next Collaborative Commission meeting. For those of you who are interested, 10 o'clock, State House Room 348, and we'll be meeting with the Commissioner of the Department of Developmental Services. One of the issues, outside of the issue of consolidation, where we seem to spend most of our time, is the issue of collaboratives and adult services. It's a major issue for a number of collaboratives, EDCO included. It's an area that we must make recommendations on at the conclusion of this process. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lapini. Questions for Dr. Lapini, please? Hearing none. Oh, Ms. Stone, you look like you might have a question.
I was just curious, Dr. Lapini, it's not about anything in your report, but given the recent announcement by the governor about his proposal on taxes, I was wondering if your professional association, or if you'd heard anything about the potential of that, whether or not it would have an impact on us, whether or not you're thinking, even beginning to think that that would factor into our own deliberations.
So we've not spent any time with Mr. Kleckner and Mr. Cronin on this yet. My understanding is, so the main area we'd be talking about in terms of impact on us is in Chapter 70. Remember that Mr. Cronin, remember that we were looking at a 2 or 3 year implementation of the new floor, the floor of 17.5%. When this march toward the new floor started, we were in the 10 to 12% range. And that was a part of the cause of our $2 million bump last year that really bailed us out, as Mr. Rowe says often and loudly. Mr. Cronin made some slightly different assumptions. He did not assume, he only assumed part of the second year of maybe a 3-year march to that 17.5%. He assumed $1 million in new Chapter 70, whereas the full implementation of that would have resulted in 2. The governor has, in what he's put out, talked about full implementation of the 2007 law around the funding formula. Full implementation means implementation of the new floor. So if that were to play out, that would be the full $2 million. And no, it's much too early to have heard anything from MASS. I have an executive committee meeting and our midwinter meeting coming up the week after next. Certainly at that executive committee meeting, we should have a better idea. That'll be, I think, just after the governor has put House 1 on the table.
Other questions? I guess I have a follow-on question for that. Would it, now that the governor has announced some revenue proposals for the state, do you think that the full implementation that you just referred to is tied to new revenues?
Yes. My understanding is that it is. And remember, the other piece that we don't have is what the impact is on unrestricted general government aid. I mean, while we look at the Chapter 70 proposal and say, isn't that terrific, that may be full implementation, there may or may not be some sort of reduction in unrestricted general government aid. We haven't seen that yet. There may be some additional MBTA assessments, as Mr. Cronin's taught me well, to pay for the infrastructure work that's going to need to be done in addition to the tax dollars. So those are the pieces that we'll know about as we see House 1.
Ms. Chalowski?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's also some monies targeted towards early childhood education.
There are.
Some significant.
They are
piece of that
significant.
To have, I think, universal 4-year-old programs.
Universal to clear the decks on the waiting list. Yes.
That? 30,000.
Okay. I think as a follow-on to the superintendent's report, we need school committee action on the first reading of the 2013-2014 calendar.
So it is a first reading. So the action will be required on the 31st.
You're right. Okay.
So, so this is the calendar that's a piece of the calendar. This is part 2. You already at one time approved a starting date. We knew this calendar was a challenge from the beginning. It's a challenge because we have a holiday within what is traditionally in Brookline the first week for students. But let me skip to another piece first. What is not in this calendar is anything around early release. Remember that the collective bargaining agreement, in terms of our new structure of extended time and collaboration time, gives me till March 1st to present that model. We're obviously not going to present the remainder of the model around any early release until we have that model. So by March 1st, you'll get part 3 of the calendar. But we think it's important to get part 2, that is the starting dates, the holidays, the proposed ending date out to parents as quickly as we possibly can, certainly by the end of January. So the problem in this calendar is starts with September 5th, which is the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and the day we take as a day of low attendance. The other problems are included in our collective bargaining agreement. They specify that I cannot propose a calendar that starts before September 1st without authorization of the BEU. And we can't go beyond, as I've said earlier, we can't go beyond June 30th. Furthermore, the calendar, or the collective bargaining agreement states that we must have 2 teacher days prior to the start of the student year. That's actually in the collective bargaining agreement. So the problem that presents is that as we investigate what every other Metro West district is doing, we're unable to do it without authorization from the BEU. The districts around us have chosen one of 2 models to deal with this. Either they're holding their teacher days prior to Labor Day. That is scheduling 1 or 2 teacher days, generally 2, if they have that model. Prior to Labor Day, bringing back students on Tuesday, for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then on their way come Monday. Or they're scheduling 1 teacher professional development day on Tuesday, and then bringing back students for Wednesday, Friday, and then come Monday to march on. The problem for us with a model that would start on Friday Well, if you talk to senior staff, they'll argue about which is the greater problem, starting on a Friday, or the fact that it's the second day of this holiday that we traditionally observe with the 1 day of low attendance. The data on that second day are as follows. In 2012, we had 55 teacher and paraprofessional absences on that day. And in 2011, we had 80. So it's not a day for the first day of school. It doesn't work. It simply doesn't work for the first day of school. So we were left to make a request that would give us the authorization to observe either of those models that we see in all of the surrounding districts, the Newtons, the Lexingtons, the Needhams. That is, one proposal was, let's go before September 1st, let's run our professional development days the week before, and then let's start on Tuesday. The second was, let's run 1 day and use the second day later on, probably in September, and start on Tuesday. What makes this more difficult is if you look down further on the sheet and look at the ending date under the model that we've proposed here. The ending date without 1 day for snow or weather is the end of the next to the last week of June, which is late. I mean, you all know that. So there were lots of factors that played into the request. And I will say this is a first reading, and there's certainly time for additional discussion. But the early response, the response that we've received right now is no. The BEU is not interested in either of those options to modify conditions for the for the calendar for next year, and that puts me in a position where I can only propose the 2 teacher days for the 3rd and 4th, and the student start for September 9th, the following Monday. And so that's what I'm proposing tonight for first reading. If something changes in the next 2 weeks, if we're able to hold discussions that would modify that, I of course would propose one of those other 2 options, because quite frankly, this isn't an acceptable option to me. But it is what I'm forced to propose.
Ms. Chalupsky?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. There was a question that I had just about these boxes on here that I'm not clear what they are.
I believe they're shown down below. Their school closed days and the important dates are included in the key at the bottom.
No, but they're like the week before April vacation.
Like the April 14th through April 7th.
Yeah. Maybe it's just an error, a typographical error.
There's some boxes that are darkened, but there's no explanation of
Well,
what it means.
no, some are.
Well, I don't know why they showed up darkened. The 18th is Good Friday.
No, April 14th through the 17th, I think is her question.
Yeah, the
I don't know. They're school days.
Yeah.
It just showed up darkened for some reason. They are counted in the school days.
Okay. All right. I was just trying to figure out what they might be. That was all.
Ms. Kershaw?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Lupini, I think this is what you were saying about the release days. So the early release days aren't on here, but aren't there also professional development days, like the first Tuesday in November?
Now, remember that our collective bargaining agreement, that day is no longer on our schedule.
This was the last one.
The contract, and I'll speak generally here, but it now calls for 6 hours for teachers to put in 6 hours of, not as part of these days, but 6 hours of professional development approved toward district and school goals, but not in the form of 1 day that we set aside.
What was the date this year that we were supposed to end?
Probably around the last Friday in, originally probably the last, yes it was. It was the next to last Friday in June. And here we are, 2 days into the last week.
Because we've had that many.
We had 2
closings.
days. We had one day that was specifically tied to the storm, and we had a second day in terms of the cleanup where DPW requested that I remain closed so that they could get power on and clean up streets. And we complied, of course, with that request.
Right. Thank you.
So is it fair to say, and you may have said this, that ending school during the last week of June is likely to cause some negative discussion amongst a certain number of parents?
Well, historically, we have data from years that we've concluded in the last week of June, and attendance is down dramatically in the last week of June compared to the rest of the remainder of the year. And so, I don't think we should be talking about calendars that put us in a position where with 1 or 2 days, we're into the last week of June. I think that's irresponsible, quite frankly.
Agreed. Okay. Are there any other questions about the calendar?
Just what's the next step?
The next step is, should there be no changes, and again, we'll continue to talk, but should there be no changes, this will be recommended, and I use the word loosely, at your meeting on the 31st.
Is there any new business to come before the committee at this time that anyone would like to bring forward? Hearing none, Ms. Coyne, we have a need for an executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. Would you poll the committee, please?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, and when we go, after we've been in executive session, everybody should understand that we will not be reconvening here in a public meeting again. Thank you.